On this Tuesday night, open for business again. Newfoundlanders line up to stock up on necessities.
It's crowded in there today.
The trouble with transporting supplies to the province. Racing to contain the coronavirus. More deaths and new infections as the U.S. records its first case. Staying current with a digital currency. The Bank of Canada's plan. Is it competition for Bitcoin? And one last chance for the ultimate home run. The Canadian hoping to enter the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin in Newfoundland and the recovery from what's being dubbed Snowmageddon 2020. Crowds of Newfoundlanders lined up for hours outside grocery stores in St. John's, waiting to stock up on food and supplies for the first time since that historic blizzard blasted the province. The stores were only open for a few hours and residents were advised to buy what they need to last up to 2 days. A state of emergency is still in place for St. John's and schools in the city will stay closed for the rest of the week. But as Ross Lord reports, there are signs people are turning the corner.
With their kitchen shelves becoming empty, it's no wonder some of these shoppers lined up 2 hours in advance to buy groceries for the first time in 5 days.
We ran out of groceries and we had to pick up a few things.
Just here to get some, bread, milk, eggs, stick of butter.
We gotta get like milk, bread, like necessities. We're running out.
Welcome to Coleman.
What followed was a food frenzy of sorts, the polite kind, replenishing with purpose after literally fearing where their next meals would come from. Anxiety based on the province's remote location and the blizzard's crippling impact on transportation links to and within the island.
We're going to need to get what we can now because we don't know when we're going to get another opportunity. So yeah, I'm a bit worried.
Management at this grocery chain says there's nothing to worry about. Warehouses and distribution networks will keep the supply chain intact.
We don't have reason to believe that we're going to be in that level of difficulty in terms of big shortages for a long term.
In a province steeped in hardship and looking out for each other, there's growing optimism.
We get some really bad weather and the government has to declare a state of emergency and everybody just comes together.
Scenes like this are common. Volunteers shoveling out those who cannot help themselves.
To come and help this poor lady out. She couldn't get out to get any groceries, she said. So here we are.
As soldiers continue clearing paths and checking on stranded residents, Newfoundlanders are starting to reflect on how they endured. Grateful for those who sacrificed, like healthcare workers who stayed on the job for days on end with their replacements unable to travel to work. A gradual increase in traffic makes for awkward navigating in vehicles and on foot. But for the most part, there are positive steps toward a slow return to normal.
You just got to do the best that you can, that's all. Yeah. Try to grin and bear it. Grin and bear it.
Ross Lord, Global News.
Half of Newfoundland's goods, including about 90% of perishable foods, are moved by transport trucks arriving by ferry twice a day. There are 2 ferries that run between Cape Breton and Newfoundland, but only one operates year-round. And once it makes that 6 to 8 hour journey across Cabot Strait, it's another 9-hour drive around the Rock to the St. John's area, where about a third of the island's population lives. That's, of course, when roads are clear, and that hasn't been the case for much of the past 5 days. Geography is an issue in this disaster. In terms of distance, Newfoundland is remote enough. But add to the fact that it's an island and getting aid to the affected areas has been a challenge. Mike Armstrong looks at how help is being delivered and how it's being received.
Melva Walsh is calling the soldiers in front of her home angels. After 4 days trapped in her home, she was freed Tuesday by Canadian troops. Without the help, there was no way she could clear the snow, although she did try.
I did some myself the other morning. I shoveled the snow in and put it in a bucket and threw it down my bathtub. But that's it. That's all I could do.
Their numbers are still growing. The Canadian Armed Forces says by Wednesday morning, it'll have 400 soldiers and sailors on the ground. If their backs are getting sore, there doesn't seem to be much complaining.
It's going good. I mean, it's great to get out and help the community, see people smiling, everyone's happy. Makes us proud to do what we're doing.
The response to this disaster is a little like a symphony. A lot of different groups working together as much as possible in harmony. People in need call a helpline, and those calls are triaged. They're ranked in terms of urgency by the Red Cross and civil security officials.
Individuals in the St. John's area call that call line, and their task gets prioritized and dispatched to us.
Now, responding to natural disasters isn't the military's main role, but it's one it's performing more and more often. This operation is the 25th in the last 7 years, and the help is needed. The Canadian Red Cross says natural disasters in this country are increasing in frequency and severity.
Unfortunately, it is the case the impact on Canadians from these kinds of events is substantial and recurring.
The breach that we had was on the goal.
Jim Bass knows what the Army can bring to the table. He's the mayor of a Montreal borough hit hard by flooding twice in the last 3 years. Soldiers provided expertise and raw numbers that the city just didn't have. Hundreds more homes would have been flooded, Bass says, if not for the military and the coordination of resources.
For us, it worked really well because the information that we were giving civil security officials and what they were transmitting to the Army was seamless.
One thing the soldiers and sailors help with is fatigue. For emergency crews, for 5 days and counting, it's been all hands on deck. Having the extra hands has helped. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
The search for a man who disappeared in the blizzard last Friday has been suspended. The RCMP says the search for Joshua Wall will resume if any new information comes to light. Wall vanished after leaving his home in Roaches Line during the storm. A close-knit community on Newfoundland's Avalon Peninsula is mourning the loss of 2 men who passed away in the aftermath of the storm. The mayor of Harbour Grace confirmed the sudden deaths to Global News. 83-year-old Albert Budchafe, a former town councillor, died Friday. Then on Saturday, 72-year-old Rupert Crocker died. He was known around the community as Rocket. Both men, who were fixtures in the community, were doing physical activity outdoors before they died. At least 6 people have died in an outbreak of the new coronavirus, which has now reached the United States. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has confirmed the first U.S. case has been detected in Washington state. The patient, who is in isolation, recently returned from Wuhan, China, where the SARS-like respiratory illness was first detected last month. Authorities there are spraying disinfectant on the streets, and today the city revealed a series of new measures in the race to contain the deadly virus. They include the cancellation of upcoming Chinese New Year celebrations, the busiest travel season in the country. And today the World Health Organization warned the coronavirus is likely to spread.
More cases should be expected in other parts of China and possibly other countries in coming days. A team from WHO are concluding a mission with health officials in Wuhan working on the response to novel coronavirus.
At least 291 people are infected with the coronavirus in China, Thailand, South Korea, and Japan. 77 new cases were reported yesterday alone. Tomorrow, the World Health Organization is holding an emergency meeting to determine whether the outbreak constitutes a global public health emergency. There are no reported cases in Canada. For more on the symptoms of the virus, how it spreads, and how you can protect yourself, go to our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. For only the 3rd time in history, the impeachment trial of an American president is underway in Washington. The Senate began its proceedings against Donald Trump this afternoon, setting up an epic battle over whether Trump should be removed from office. As Jackson Proskow reports, even as the trial gets going, there's still debate about the evidence it will hear.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
How the impeachment trial will unfold.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment.
Dominated day 1 in the Senate.
Americans do not believe there will be a fair trial.
Where lawmakers tried to set the rules, outlining how each side will make its case.
Although the evidence against the president is already overwhelming, you may never know the full scope of the president's misconduct or those around him.
Democrats want to hear from witnesses, including White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Both men have knowledge of the president's scheme to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden.
The only conclusion will be that the president has done absolutely nothing wrong.
The president's lawyers have argued against that. while Senate Republicans use their majority to push for a speedy trial without witnesses to shield Trump from further scrutiny.
The Senate agreeing to pick up and carry on the House's inadequate investigation would set a new precedent that could incentivize frequent and hasty impeachments from future House majorities.
A trial with no evidence is not a trial at all. It's a cover-up.
Lawmakers remain so divided they can't even agree on when to debate the issue of calling witnesses. With the Republican-controlled Senate all but certain to exonerate Trump, their bigger concern may be ensuring that predetermined outcome appears at the very least legitimate.
Americans need to believe this proceeding was full and fair, and that's the way they will judge us.
Jackson, what are the chances some Republicans will ignore party lines and vote to allow witnesses?
Well, Robin, several have already hinted that they're open to the idea of hearing from witnesses, but they don't want to make a decision about that until later on in the trial. It is worth noting that some Republicans also pushed back against their leadership today on some of those other rule matters that came up, and Leader Mitch McConnell actually gave in to their demands, so they may have some leverage here.
And the rules surrounding this impeachment trial are tightly controlled. What kind of restrictions do politicians and the press face?
Yeah, senators can't bring any electronics into the chamber with them. They must sit in absolute silence for the duration of the trial. Reporters, too, have faced heavy restrictions. There are no independent cameras or still cameras allowed inside the Senate chamber. Reporters can only bring in a pen and paper, no electronics, and they've actually lost access to many of the places where they can normally question senators on Capitol Hill. These are all rules brought in by the Republican majority.
Jackson Proskow in Washington. Back here at home, there's a new development in the race to fill Andrew Scheer's role as the Conservative Party leader. Quebec's former Liberal Premier Jean Charest says he won't be making a leadership bid. In a statement, he says the Conservatives have undergone deep changes since I left in 1998, and my positions regarding a number of social issues are based on deep convictions. The news comes days after Quebec's anti-corruption squad revived an investigation into Liberal Party fundraising during Charest's tenure. The long-awaited trade agreement among Canada, the United States and Mexico will be ratified next week. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made that announcement today on the final day of a three-day cabinet retreat. There was a lot on the agenda during meetings in Winnipeg, but Trudeau says the new North American free trade deal will be top priority when Parliament resumes. Let's bring in Abigail Beeman. Abigail, it's been a long and at times rocky road to get to this point.
Robin, as Liberal ministers met behind closed doors here, part of the focus was how to work in a minority government. And the first hurdle will be the Canada-US-Mexico agreement.
Passing the new NAFTA in Parliament is our priority. Millions of Canadians depend on stable, reliable trade with our largest trading partners, from farmers in Alberta and auto workers in Windsor to aluminum producers in Saguenay and entrepreneurs in St. John's or in Vancouver.
The Liberals will need the support of another party to do it, and today the opposition isn't promising anything. Conservatives say they want to be briefed throughout the process and warn they won't rubber stamp anything. The NDP haven't been clear about their support yet either. And the Bloc Québécois leader stuck to his guns. He won't support the deal as is without further protections for aluminum workers. As for what other bills we could see this winter session, the Justice Minister hopes to table new assisted dying legislation in February, and the Prime Minister says some kind of action on gun control is coming within weeks. But no specifics there, nor on some other big campaign promises, such as pharmacare or how to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Liberal ministers now head back to Ottawa, where the larger Liberal caucus will meet over the next 3 days. Robin?
Abigail Beeman in Winnipeg. The remains of one Canadian who was on the downed Ukrainian airliner have been returned home. Canada says Iran is so far respecting the victims' families' wishes for burial by repatriating remains. But our foreign minister is still pushing Tehran to release the plane's black boxes to another country so that crucial data can be quickly downloaded and there can be an independent investigation. 176 people, including 57 Canadians, were killed when Iran's military shot the plane down. The trend of going digital. Coming up, why Canada's central bank is banking on cryptocurrency. Digital dollars may be in the works for the Bank of Canada. The nation's central bank is joining forces with 5 other major institutions to study the benefits of introducing a digital currency. As Couteur reports, it comes as more consumers turn toward electronic forms of payment.
When salad seller Mad Radish opened in Ottawa 2 years ago, it tossed cash in favor of debit and credit only. Other businesses have followed, and so have consumers.
We've just sort of shifted to that Apple Pay, and that's been super handy as well. You don't even have to pull out your credit cards.
According to an organization that tracks payments in Canada, 73% of all transactions in this country are electronic. So we're essentially already a digital economy. The Bank of Canada is now looking at digital currency.
The bank needs to think about other emerging payment technologies. These, of course, include crypto assets, such as Bitcoin.
The Bank of Canada announced today it's joining forces with 5 other central banks in England, Japan, Sweden, Switzerland, and the European Central Bank to study digital currencies. It's hard to ignore given the emergence of Bitcoin. The percentage of Canadians who own the cryptocurrency jumped from 2.9% to 5% between 2016 and 2017. Now, most people use it as an investment vehicle. After all, 1 Bitcoin is worth more than $11,000 Canadian. But it's highly volatile, and some predict its days are numbered.
The moment the central banks get into digital currency, that will be the death knell for these private digital currencies.
China is already working on its own digital currency, and social media giant Facebook is doing the same. It's why business professor Ian Lee says Canada has no choice but to start looking at it. However, he points out our central bank has to be careful not to become competition for commercial banks.
If they created such an attractive digital currency, they would suck all that deposit money, or a lot of it, out of the banking system.
A spokesperson with the Bank of Canada cautions these discussions with other countries are just exploratory and no decision has been made yet. But when you consider where our economy already is, the central bank may have to create a digital currency to remain current. Couteur, Global News, Ottawa.
Still ahead, a Canadian teen joins Greta Thunberg to call for climate action at the World Economic Forum.
You're watching Global National.
Here's stunning footage of a deadly inferno caused by a pipeline accident on Sunday in Lagos, Nigeria. The fire burned through homes in the surrounding district. At least 4 people were killed, but unverified reports from witnesses suggest more may have perished. Officials are blaming oil thieves, a common cause for many pipeline fires in the country. A Canadian teen had a major presence at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland today.
Of the work we do, because a lot of it is
15-year-old Autumn Peltier is an Indigenous water activist from Northern Ontario. She was part of a panel that included 17-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. The teens called for action over empty promises. Peltier says young people deserve to be taken seriously.
Even the fact that us youth have to be up here trying to create awareness and make change, I feel it's almost kind of wrong, and we shouldn't be having to do this.
It seems like the climate and environment is a hot topic right now, and a lot thanks to young people pushing. But of course, if you see it from another perspective, pretty much nothing has been done since the global emissions of CO2 has not reduced.
The invitation-only conference brings together business leaders, heads of state, and celebrities. This year's theme is Stakeholders for a Sustainable and Cohesive World. Up next, the last chance for Canadian Larry Walker to slide into the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's some breaking news in the sports world tonight involving one of Canada's greatest baseball players. BC-born Larry Walker has been voted into baseball's Hall of Fame. This was his 10th and final year of eligibility. And as Eric Sorensen reports, Walker had low expectations, but his fans didn't.
The kind of numbers that he's had in his...
Oh, my! He was one of the most natural athletes in the game. The rare 5-tool player, Larry Walker could hit and hit with power. He had speed and could field his position with the best of them. As a youngster, he thought he'd be a hockey goaltender, only turning to baseball as a teenager when the Montreal Expos found him.
They offered me quite a great contract or a signing bonus of $1,500 US.
Only one Canadian has ever made the Baseball Hall of Fame, pitcher Ferguson Jenkins. Walker paved the way for other Canadian hitters and inspired countless youngsters.
I've seen my name at all the top of the records as far as Canadian-born players, and I hope it encourages young kids in Canada to perhaps take the same road if that their wish is desired to do that.
Critics say his stats benefited from playing in the thin air in Denver for years. Still, he won 3 batting titles, was the league MVP, and won 7 Gold Gloves.
If you look at the people on the ballot, he deserves it. He deserves to be named on 75% of the ballots.
For Larry Walker, the one-time Montreal Expo and the long-time Colorado Rocky, the Hall of Fame looked out of reach for most of his 10 years of eligibility. To make it, at least 75% of baseball writers had to vote for him. For several years, Walker barely hit 20%. In 2014, he fell to 10%. But as the logjam of superstars became enshrined in those years, Walker's chances improved. And with modern analytics, Walker's all-round game looked better and better. He reached 34%, and last year almost 55%. And in this, his last year, he would need another big jump. Walker needed 75% of the votes cast. His final total? He cleared 76%.
Larry Walker becomes the first position player and second Canadian-born member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
It is one of the most stunning changes of heart in the history of Hall of Fame voting, more than triple the support Walker had 3 years ago from baseball writers. In his last swing for the Hall of Fame, Walker joins the likes of Jim Rice and another Expo, Tim Raines, each voted in their last year of eligibility. To be enshrined in baseball's Hall of Fame in his last chance was like Larry Walker in the bottom of the 9th one more time. He came through in the clutch. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Well done. That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Canmore, Alberta. We would love to see your corner of this country, so email your pictures to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and have a great night.